Hello and welcome back to Live from Paris. It's time now for business news with William Edwards. Hello, William.
Hi, Lorna.
So this week, of course, sees another crucial EU summit that's coming up on Thursday and Friday. What's the latest on the Eurozone crisis?
Well, of course, Spain and Greece remain at the centre of the Eurozone crisis, and in fact, Spain today is officially going to ask for that €100 billion bank bailout, which was announced a couple of weeks ago. But quite a few big details are still yet to be finalised, including whether the money can go straight to the banks or whether it has to go via the central government. That is, according to the EU rules, what it has to do, go via the government. But the worry is, of course, that if you add an extra €100 billion of debt onto the Spanish government, which is already having problems borrowing on the bond markets, it might make life even more difficult for them, even though the money is ultimately destined for Spanish banks.
OK, and in the meantime, Greece has come out with its list of demands with that new government now in place.
Yes, now, of course, the elections recently in Greece did produce a pro-bailout result, in theory at least, and the new government does say it is going to stick to its bailout commitments, but it does say also that it wants a 2-year extension to those commitments. So whether that's the same as sticking to it, well, a lot of people have questioned that. Meanwhile, there are concerns over whether Thursday's EU summit can actually be that productive, given that two key members of the Greek government are, in fact, on medical leave and won't be there. Let's take a look at the details.
This is where the Greek Prime Minister is staying, and he won't be leaving for some time. Less than 1 week after taking office, Antonis Samaras is in hospital after an urgent eye operation. His doctors say he's recovering well, but is not fit enough to travel yet.
As to whether he can travel abroad for the Eurogroup meeting, I categorically state that he cannot travel. He's recovering from major surgery and needs to stay in bed.
The newly appointed Finance Minister, Vasilis Rapanos, has also fallen ill and will miss the EU summit. Representatives from the Troika have cancelled their planned visit to Athens. Greece's Foreign Minister and outgoing Finance Minister will attend the meeting instead. They face an uphill battle as the government hopes to renegotiate the terms of the €130 billion bailout deal agreed in February. Under growing pressure from the public, Athens wants to seek a 2-year extension to the 2014 deadline to cut its budget deficit to 2.1% of GDP. It also hopes to freeze or reduce public sector layoffs, though it promised to cut 150,000 jobs by 2015. The government wants to keep paying unemployment benefits for 2 years instead of 1 year as promised. Athens' request will likely meet stern opposition from Europe's paymaster, Germany. Its finance minister said Greece should stop asking for more help and instead move quickly to enact the reform measures already agreed. The EU meeting comes at a crucial time for Greece. It needs €7.6 billion by the end of July to cover maturing debt.
Well, meanwhile, William, sympathy with Greece seems to be in pretty short supply elsewhere in the Eurozone.
Yeah, a survey done by IFOP and the French newspaper called Le Journal du Dimanche yesterday said that, respondents in 4 countries were asked, if Greece can't reduce its debt and deficit, do you think they should leave the euro? And as you can see, the yes answer there was pretty high, especially in Germany, where sympathy seems to be lowest for Greece. France not too far behind, but then Italy and Spain, interestingly enough, because of course they're having debt issues of their own on a much larger scale than France and Germany, they are much more sympathetic to the Greeks. Meanwhile, it's interesting to see that actually interest in the euro, support for the euro itself, remains pretty high. Asked if they wanted to go back to their previous currency, the old francs and Deutschmarks, etc., actually most people said no in those 4 countries surveyed. As you can see, again, in Germany, the answer there was lowest. In fact, that means that they are most nostalgic for the Deutschmark, which does have a lot of support still in Germany, but still not a bad turnout support for the euro, just considering what a long crisis it's been through.
Indeed, 3/4 of Spaniards behind it. That's interesting to see. Let's take a quick check now on the markets. How are they doing?
Concerns carrying on about the state of the Eurozone, with the European markets opening generally down. It's not been a good few days, of course, in the run-up to the close of play at the end of last week, so that trend has continued, as you can see there. Meanwhile, in Asia, things are generally down as well. There was quite a bit of bad data out last week weighing on the markets, seeming to point to a global slowdown in manufacturing production.
Okay, well, back here in France, we're also talking budgets because the new government is getting down to business on France's budget.
Yeah, Jean-Marc Ayrault, he's the new Prime Minister. He's going to be meeting with ministers later on today to discuss the budget and, of course, how to get the deficit under control. France has made not bad progress, really, over the last few years, trying to bring that deficit down. But if it is going to get to that 3% level, which they are hoping to hit in 2013, they are going to need to make cuts. Now, of course, François Hollande, during his presidential election campaign, he really focused on tax rises for the rich because that's something that a broad swathe of voters he hoped could get behind. But he really didn't talk much about the cuts that he'll need to make because, of course, that's not very much of a vote winner. Now, it does look like, in fact, we've heard from Pierre Moscovici, the finance minister, this morning. He says France will need to find 7 to 10 billion euros if it's going to reach that 2013 deficit target. And so, of course, it's going to be a mixture of cuts and, of course, those tax rises, including a much heralded one to as much as 75% for top earners.
Oh, you don't find that kind of money behind the back of the sofa, do you? It's going to be hard cuts to come. Well, speaking of that 75% top tax rate, the UK's David Cameron said last week that if France introduces such high taxes, Britain will roll out the red carpet for French entrepreneurs. That comment didn't go down well on this side of the channel, of course, but in London there are already many French companies taking advantage of the competitive business climate. Take a look.
Just 2 hours on the Eurostar from Paris is Ashford International in the heart of England. It's the ideal location for French editor Olivier Cadic and his comic book business, and the fine English food isn't the only attraction.
Back in 1996, I discovered by chance the difference in social security contributions paid by French and British employers. In France, it's 48%, in the UK, 10%. I moved here to protect my business, which otherwise would have gone under thanks to international competition.
To help French entrepreneurs make the move across the pond is David Blanc. Since the recent elections in France, business is going rather well.
In recent weeks, we've had a number of inquiries from French business owners potentially looking to relocate to the UK, on the one hand for company tax rates, but also for personal fiscal reasons.
It's a trend that's reflected in other areas like housing. In this exclusive London neighborhood, John Waters is awaiting the arrival of new French clients.
So this apartment is very typical of the sort of property that a French buyer would look for in London.
Desirable address indeed.
On his company's website, the number of French people searching for London properties costing upwards of 6 million euros has jumped by 33% in the last 6 months.
When Hollande announced that there would be a wealth tax for people earning 1 million euros or more, we saw a spike in the number of searches for very high-end properties in London.
It seems a number of French people have already set up shop in London. Whether the trend will grow or slow depends on the reforms taken by Hollande's government this summer.
Well, thanks very much indeed, William, for that look at today's business news. And that's just about it from us for now. Thanks for joining us, and do stay tuned. Stuart Norval will be here after the weather with more news headlines. Bye for now.